What's going on, y'all? It's Big Facts again, coming at you with another video. So I just wanted to give y'all a little crash course on recent upcoming world events. I want to start doing that in my channel a little bit more. Basically, a lot of people don't really have understanding as to what's going on in the world, and there are a lot of things, boiling over, and people need to be aware of that. And one battle that's been going on, and I know the media here in the United States has not been doing a great job in talking about it and making the American public aware until something major happens, which by that time will be too late, is this Saudi Arabia-Iran Cold War conflict. Now, this Cold War has been brewing since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, and people have not really, this really hasn't gotten to the spotlight unless America gets, something happens on Americans, and then that's when the U.S. Media wants to carry it, which I understand. But the public at large needs to be aware and cognizant as to what's going on in the world and why our government does the things it does. So whether it be Democrat or Republican, U.S. foreign policy has always remained the same. So whether Donald Trump stays or the next person stays, they're going to follow the same course of action. Now, Iran and Saudi Arabia, as you see here on the map, have been getting at it since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, so well over 40 years. And what happened in the Iranian Revolution is that you had the religious supreme leader Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew the monarch that was in Iran, and I forget his name. I think his name was Reza Shah. They overthrew him. Reza Shah ran back to the United States. Jimmy Carter brought him there, and then later became ill and passed because he needed medical attention. Later got passed on, but just a fast forward. That Iranian Revolution, what that signified to the Saudis was that their presence politically in the geopolitical sphere as, the leader of the Islamic world was now in jeopardy because they had a supreme Islamic leader in Iran who actually questioned the legitimacy of the Saudi Arabian monarch and Saudi Arabia being the leader of the Islamic world. Now, there are two major sects in Islam. You have the Shia and the Sunni. Now, Iran is a flag bearer of the Shia sect of Islam, while Saudi Arabia is the flag bearer for the Sunni sect. And majority of the world's Muslims are Sunni. However, with that said, Iran, it being, a major Shia majority, you look at countries like Iraq. Iraq has a large Shia population, but they were led with a Sunni, but he was more so of a secular leader. That was Saddam Hussein. Now, Saddam Hussein was basically the buffer between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And when the United States came in, they kind of screwed that whole shit up. All right. Taking out Saddam Hussein was one of the worst things because he was actually the buffer between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And that's why we see a lot of the conflicts now popping off. You see fights in Lebanon where Hezbollah, which is a militant group is a Shia militant group backed by Iran. You see all these little proxy skirmishes. You see Syria, which is a Sunni majority country, is being led by a Shia leader, al-Assad. He's a Shiite, and that's why you see the skirmishes there, in which Iran is backed by the Russians in that aspect, by their giving them weapons to take out the rebels who are backed by the United States. So you see all these little proxy wars where the United States is funding all these rebels. Iran is basically trying to prop up the governments, the Shia-led governments in a lot of these Islamic countries, and vice versa. Which is why when you've seen the Arab Spring, you've seen battles in Qatar, Bahrain, and as well as Yemen, which has been in the recent news. Now, the Saudis, they don't like any of that. All right. They do not like any of that because that threatens their monarchy. They've seen the overthrow of a lot of Arab leaders after the Arab Spring, and then they look at it like, hey, they could be next. And like with anything, when it comes to power, nobody wants to lose power. Nobody wants to lose control. And that's why Saudi Arabia has been looking for the United States to kind of be more active in this. But I don't know how much more active they could get the United States to be without having World War III spark off. Because if the United States jumps in the middle, of this whole Saudi Arabia Iran Cold War, then you're definitely going to have the entrance of the Russians and the Chinese, who are not happy with the United States, especially with the sanctions that they have levied, the tariffs, the trade war going on with China. So they will have every reason to want to jump in and back Iran, because they're going to look at the United States as been nothing but a destabilizer of countries throughout the world. And with that said, that's going to give Iran a lot of the muscle and the might. Now, I want y'all to take a look at the map of Iran. As you can see here with all this great Iran, to invade Iran is very difficult. And the Iranians know that, which is why Saudi Arabia, they're just so militarily inept with all the money that they've spent on military goods, on military weapons, bombs, aircrafts, etc. They cannot do anything to threaten Iran. One, because the way things work in the military there is dysfunctional. A lot of people hoard information in terms of trying to state their importance, and a lot of the orders come from the top down because of the monarchy's fear of an overthrow or fear of a coup. They feel like if they give orders to certain generals or more power, the generals can eventually overtake them. So that is already making the Saudi Arabian militarily weak, which is why they're having troubles fighting the Yemenis. Now, in Yemen, there's a civil war going on between two different political factions, and the two factions that you have here in Iran, that you have going on in Syria are led by Saleh and Hadi. Now, you have pro-Hadi supporters, they are supported by Saudi Arabia and the United States. And then you have pro-Saleh supporters, which are backed by Iran and the Russians, etc. Now, with that said, many people say, well, why doesn't the United States, and the point of looking at the Iranian map is, why doesn't the United States just jump in and try to invade Iran and just squash all this? Well, it's not that simple, because if that was the case, the Saudis would have done it. Iran has very, very, very harsh terrain. It's a very mountainous area. And with the weaponry and the aircraft, even if you put in aircraft and they have an air superiority, looking where Tehran is located, it's in a very mountainous area. It will be very difficult to have a conventional war against Iran, to have a land invasion. That will be strenuous on any military's resources, especially the United States. That's why the United States wants to keep army bases here in Iraq, want to keep bases in Turkey, or have at least a good working relationship with Turkey so they could keep their bases there, because with that, they can at least keep an eye or check on Iran. And Iran wants the United States out of Iraq. They want them out of Turkey, which is why they were happy with the whole, with the whole conflict between the United States and Turkey and the sanctions being levied on them during the Obama administration, because that was just pushing one step closer to getting the United States out of Turkey. Now, the Trump administration has been trying, I give them credit, they have been trying to mend that relationship. So if you look at it geopolitically, that is one thing that the Trump administration can hang their hat on. However, everything else they've done has been a mess, okay? They've been a mess by agitating the Chinese, because you're just giving them more incentive to want to come in and help Iran to defeat you. So with that said, I think because you cannot invade Iran with this, with the rough terrain that they have, the best thing that the United States should do is to try to bring stability into the region. And that is the best way to try to topple Iran, because what Iran is doing so far, they are winning this Cold War. Believe it or not, they are winning. They have the Yemenis, those rebels down there, starting the Houthi rebels. They have them basically causing all sorts of damages and all sorts of hell to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia also has to worry about back up north with Iraq being in a civil war, and with the Shias now in control of Iraq, especially during the battle for Baghdad. And then you look at it to the east of them, you have battles in Qatar and Bahrain. So every corner you look, Saudi Arabia is entrenched in war zones. Jordan, Syria, right up to the north. So Saudi Arabia looks like the world is coming to cave in on them. And if the United States doesn't step in, all these Shia-backed forces will soon take over and surround Saudi Arabia. And before you know it, if austerity hits Saudi Arabia, the people now will rise up and overthrow the Saudi Arabian monarchy. And which is why it's important. Saudi Arabia has been trying to press the importance of diversifying their economy, because now they have had to tap into their reserve accounts, because people have to understand the dollar is still powerful in the world. It's the world's reserve currency. And because the topple of gas prices, oil prices, in 2015, it made things hard for the Saudi Arabian government. All right. They couldn't have the welfare state that they once had. They've now had to tap into the reserves. A lot of the people there are not really, high skilled workers as compared to Iran. A lot of the Saudi Arabians there, a lot of the people in Saudi Arabia that work in these oil companies or work in the engineering firms are expats. All right. And when Saudi Arabia economy basically took a hit due to the fall of oil prices, they had to do those jobs there that were hiring these expats had to cut back. And expats only have 30 days to find work in Saudi Arabia, or they are asked to leave the country. So which is why you see a lot of the Saudi Arabian government has been pushing a lot of their students to go to the United States to pick up skills like in engineering, etc., mathematics, technology, etc., and to come back to Saudi Arabia. Because when you look at it in the human capital field, they are far behind the Iranians. Iran now, because of their geographic location and because they don't have basically the economic advantage in producing oil like the Saudi Arabians do, they actually take a hit. However, they do have a very highly skilled economy or highly skilled workforce. They just need to make things improve economically for themselves, which is the improvement of gas prices, which is why you see China trying to, build pipelines going through the Caspian Sea, going through Azerbaijan and Armenia and Turkmenistan, which Iran would definitely have some sort of hold or some sort of influence in that happening. So overall, there's a lot going on. I mean, I just try to give people a up to speed look or explanation as to what's going on in the world. Like, I mean, you could just Google search a lot of these things. You look at the Iran-Saudi proxy conflict, and you see here, when you look at the battle between Saudi Arabia and Iran, you see who's in power, who's leading what, and just basically like overall, the Saudis, their main complaint is, look, they want to continue to be looked at as the center of the Islamic world. Iran has tried to topple that by taking over and causing all sorts of skirmishes surrounding throughout the region, and basically overthrowing those governments, just bringing instability. And the United States has not made it any easier for their ally, Saudi Arabia, because they've actually made it, quite honestly, they've actually been doing the job for Iran. I mean, by invading Iraq, made it easier for those the Shiites there to start a civil war and then to regain power. The same thing in Yemen, the civil war going on in Yemen, battles in Qatar and Bahrain, as well as in Syria. The United States backing those rebels in Syria and trying to destabilize a legitimate government only gave Russia even more reason to want to come in to bomb the hell out of the rebels. And then also the Iranians backing al-Assad, a Shiite leader. So right now, if I have to call it, the Iranians are winning the war. They're winning this Cold War. And at this point, the best bet for the United States, I would say, if they do not want to be dragged into another long conflict, that probably could see no end, is to just basically bring stability into the nation, into the surrounding nations, economically, because when you have other countries economically prosper, the appetite for fighting will not be there. And I think starting off with Yemen, they have to end that conflict in Yemen. Once you end that conflict in Yemen and bringing stability, just settling off the two factions, then from there you can venture off into Iraq, bringing stability into Iraq because the United States is there. But I know the United States doesn't necessarily want that, because then there's going to be reason for them to have to leave their base. They're going to have to leave their bases there, and then the Shiites will be in control of Iraq. So it's going to be difficult, but it is possible. I'm going to continue to bring you guys more updates as to what's going on in the area. So like, comment, subscribe down below. I want to hear what you guys have to say. So far, Iran is winning this Cold War. They're supporting the Houthis. The Houthis, they're giving them the weapons, the ammunitions, the strategy needed to be able to take out Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia's military is very weak. Believe it or not. No matter how much money they spend on military, it's very weak. The strategicness of their leaders is poor, and they can be destabilized with ease. So, like I said, comment, subscribe down below. I'm out. Till next time.